Hey, what up YouTube? Welcome back to a new video with Rams fan YT. In today's video, we're going to go over my predictions for this upcoming week of football. We've got some FA Trophy third round games. We've got Tyne-Wear Derby. We've got the Nene Derby, which is the game between Peterborough United and Northampton Town. Some Champions League games and so much more. So let's get straight into it with Atalanta hosting Chelsea in the Champions League tonight. I think the Italian side is actually quite a strong side at the moment. Although in the actual Champions League table, they're in 10th. They're unbeaten in the last 4 games in this competition, same as Chelsea. They're both on 10 points. I reckon this could be a fairly even game in this one. We're going to go with a 0-0 draw. Inter Milan are hosting Liverpool at the San Siro, and Liverpool need to win, I would imagine, this game in order to qualify automatically and not go to the playoffs. It's not an easy challenge up against an Inter side, which are currently 4th in the Champions League table. You'd certainly think that with all the pressure that Arne Slot is over and that poor performance in their last game up against PSV Eindhoven, the Liverpool we're expecting reaction, and I reckon they'll get it here. 2-0 to Liverpool. Tottenham Hotspur versus Slavia Prague. An interesting one, certainly. Spurs are the lowest ranked out of the English teams, currently in 16th in the Champions League. They're pretty much destined, I would imagine, at this point to be getting playoff standards of the knockout competition in order to get through with this. I think this could be a difficult challenge. Slavia Prague, even though they're 31st and will definitely be out of the Champions League, they're no mugs. They're a difficult team to beat. They're very physical. So I think this could be a 1-1 draw in this one. In the Championship, we've got Blackburn Rovers versus Oxford United tonight, which is a bit of a relegation battle, maybe. There's 3 points separating these two teams, and Oxford is only 1 point above the relegation zone. Blackburn were having a bit of a run before, but that's sort of turned a bit over the recent weeks. But I reckon they go back to winning ways in this one. 2-1 to Blackburn Rovers at Ewood Park. I don't imagine either of these two teams at the moment are going to be relegated, although you can never say never in this league. Charlton Athletic versus Middlesbrough. Charlton have lost the last 4 games in a row, and they're beginning now to almost look like they're going to be involved in a relegation battle. And I have got question marks over the manager. You know, they started so well, Charlton Athletic, so they clearly have a squad that is very good. But is Nathan Jones necessarily a championship level manager? Considering, if you look at it, he definitely has had success in the past at this level. But yeah, I think he's been involved in relegation scraps as well as promotion battles during his time. It's ultimately about backing him. Do they leave it until the January and make some changes? Maybe. But it's a difficult game, this one, nonetheless, against a Middlesbrough side that is very much in form, second in the table. I think will be on 50-50. I'm getting automatic promotion or not, but definitely a minimum position of playoffs at least at the moment. But I think they win this one. 1-0 to Borough. On to the next one is Preston North End versus Coventry City. Coventry's great run got broken in their last game in almost catastrophic style, losing 3-0 to Ipswich Town, which, yeah, it's a really interesting one. Are we going to see the first strains a bit of this Coventry side? I reckon they could get another loss in this one. I'm going to say a 1-0 to Preston. They're a decent team this year, Preston. They're looking well on course to be able to get into the playoffs, which I don't think any of us would have predicted at the start of the season. So yeah, 1-0 to Preston. It's at Deepdale as well. So home advantage. Sheffield United versus Norwich City. Sheffield United have managed to push themselves a bit clear of relegation zone now with 4 wins in a row, 5 games unbeaten now. They're now 5 points above the relegation zone. And in the relegation zone is Portsmouth, and they're 5 points. It's Norwich. They're 5 points away from safety. We'll come to Portsmouth in a few minutes' time. But yeah, this is a really, really fascinating one. So to speak of it, Norwich are. I don't know how you'd quite think of them, but I think a very underwhelming season for both of these two teams. Actually, why on earth have you stopped moving the cursor? I need to get a new mouse at some point. I might get it for my. It's a bit too late for asking for Christmas presents, but I might ask for it for my birthday because currently my cursor just absolutely hates playing. So I'll be back in a few minutes to get this sorted. Right, we're back. Sorry about that inconvenience. But yes, we were talking about Sheffield United and their good form of winning 4 in a row up against Norwich City, who aren't doing that well this season. So in this one, almost predictably, I've gone with a Sheffield United win, 2-0 to the Blades. Southampton versus West Bromwich Albion, 16th versus 11th. Southampton have only had 1 loss in the last 6 games and 5 wins. All their other games are in total. Yeah, I believe Southampton now probably get themselves into the playoff picture, at least come the end of the season. They've finally kicked into gear after a bit of a slow start for the Saints. I think they win this one here at St Mary's, 3-1 to Southampton, which if certain games go their way, would mean that they get lifted into the playoffs. Swansea City versus Portsmouth. Yeah, another relegation battle in this. 3 points separating these two teams. The change of Swansea finally put an end to their losing streak. They won their last game. I think this will be a very difficult game for either side to win overall. I think it's going to be a 2-2 draw as a result, which doesn't suit either team at present, but it's more realistically what's going to happen, I think. Watford versus Sheffield Wednesday. 4 defeats in a row for Sheffield Wednesday. They're under a real difficult position. I won't be surprised if they lost their manager who just walks away from the club at this moment, because minus 10 points, you're never going to stay up at this point. It would take 28 points to be able to even stay up, and they're pretty much deserted. Doesn't mean you should lose heads and give up hope, but that hope is fading. It's so early on. And they're up against a Watford side that is in decent form. But you know what? I'm going to go with a decent 1-1 draw in this one, chipping away at that deficit. Queen's Park Rangers versus Birmingham City, 10th versus 8th, both on 28 points. I would say Birmingham on the balance of play is probably the better team. They've got a better strike force and a better defence, but they're both on exactly the same amount of form. 8 wins, 4 draws, 7 losses. I think Loftus Road could prove to be the defining feature in this game. Queen's Park Rangers to win by 2-1. A very competitive game, though. Doncaster Rovers versus Stockport County in League One. Doncaster managed to get past Chesterfield in the FA Cup in the last game that they were in. Was Stockport in the FA Cup? I can't remember if they were still in the FA Cup. But Stockport are currently in the playoffs in 5th. They're a very decent team. Doncaster have been on a poor run of form, although have slightly seen an uptick in the last couple of games. Win for Stockport County as they continue their hunt for at least getting a playoff finish, if not automatics. It's very good for this level of side. You don't normally expect Stockport to be challenging for the championship promotion. It'll be interesting if they do get it. Exeter City versus AFC Wimbledon. 4 games now without a win for AFC Wimbledon, which has sort of seen their playoff charge slightly falter off. But maybe they can regather it. They had a break over last weekend, which will be quite helpful for them as they're taking on Exeter, who beat Wickham in the FA Cup. Exeter 1 point above a relegation zone. They're there for a reason, and I think Wimbledon win this one 2-0 to the London-based side. Leyton Orient versus Luton Town. Luton are currently 1 point off the playoffs, although a heck of a swing of goal difference will be needed if they are to get it. On goal difference at the moment because they are in a poor run of form. Leyton Orient, they've seen performances improve slightly over the last few weeks, but still a very much mid-table side compared to where they were last season. So I'm going to have to back Luton to win this one by 2-1. Lincoln City versus Barnsley. Barnsley only one defeat in the last 6 games, although there's a fair few draws in that as well. They're now 3 points off the playoffs, and I would certainly tip them out of the teams outside the playoffs at the moment to be able to get into them. And Bradford, a very interesting one. Lincoln, a very interesting one, considering they're in the playoffs with 31 points. You wouldn't necessarily suspect it, but I think Barnsley on this better run of form will probably just be able to edge out Lincoln 2-1 to Conor Hurahan's men at Barnsley. Mansfield Town versus Bolton Wanderers. Bolton have been looking very good in the league, unbeaten in the last 5 now, although they were knocked out of the FA Cup on the weekend, maybe a bit surprisingly, so to speak, because they were definitely big boys in the competition at that stage. Mansfield, they've lost their last 3 and a bit of a lower mid-table side at the moment. However, the table is still quite close, and I reckon change could be seen here, and Bolton's unbeaten run in the league come to an end. 2-1 to Mansfield Town at home. It could be one of them unlikely upsets that you do see across English football. Northampton Town versus Huddersfield Town. Huddersfield are without a win in the last 3. We just see them drop out of the playoffs or playoff hunt anyway. Although they are still only 2 points away from the playoffs, a win here will probably see them get into it. However, I do think Northampton Town, as unlikely as it is, get a win in this one. I think it will be an end-to-end 3-2 win for Northampton Town, which will be a bit of a shock, maybe. Port Vale versus Bradford City. Bradford are the undeniable surprise package, I would say, in the league this season. Currently in second, having been promoted last season from League 2. They've certainly hit form again this season. Port Vale on the opposite end of the table. They're marooned at the bottom of the table. 3 points off safety, though, which they may view as an opportunity. Maybe they view this as a bit of a reset. And this may come as a bit of a shock to some. But I think Port Vale at home could win this one. 2-0 to get only their 4th win of the season. It then doesn't look so bad for a Port Vale fan's perspective. Stevenage versus Cardiff City. You've got first versus third, 4 points separating these two teams. And I, for one, can't split these two teams at the moment. So I think we're going to have a 0-0 draw at the Lamex Stadium. Also, Stevenage got 2 games in hand over both Bradford and Lincoln, their team above them and below them, and a game in hand over Cardiff, who are top of the league. Win their couple of games in hands, and they are then suddenly looking really strong this season for a title win even, which would be very surprising. I don't think many people had Stevenage to win the title at the start of their season in their predictions. Wycombe versus Plymouth Argyle. Wycombe are one of the best teams on form, I would argue, in the entirety of League One at the moment. And I think have an outside shout and maybe getting playoffs. So 4 points away, but the season is still long. And as they continue that good run of form, why can't they get into it at the end of the season? And they're up against the Plymouth side, who are rubbish this season. Generally think they could be last, like bottom of the league. I generally have not seen a worse team. 32 goals conceded is the worst defence in the league. 19 goals scored is pretty shoddy as well. Yeah, we've got to back Wycombe to win this one. 2-0 to the Chairboys. Yeah, Plymouth, where did it all go wrong? We were not that long ago in a championship. So, yeah, interesting one, that. Reading versus Peterborough United. 5 games without defeat for Reading at the moment. Peterborough seem to have an upturn in form, but they lost their last 2 games in the league. They're still only 1 point off safety. I wouldn't rule them out from staying up. If there was a single team that I'd back to stay up this season in the bottom 4, it would be Peterborough United, because they've certainly got the capabilities, I think, in that squad. But I think Reading win this one fairly comfortably. 3-1 to Reading. If they can continue their good form, they can maybe move out of a mid-table positions and into a playoff challenging. But they need to keep the form going for at least another month, which is always difficult. Barnet versus Bristol Rovers. Barnet have had 5 draws in a row in the league, which is absolutely ridiculous. But Bristol Rovers have had like 6 or 7 defeats in a row now. They're 1 point above the relegation zone. I would actually say at the moment, I would suspect Bristol Rovers get relegated along with Cheltenham Town, which is an interesting one because neither of them are actually in relegation zone at the moment. But yeah, I think both of them have the potential to fall through. I think because of how many draws Barnet have had of late, we are going to go with another one. A 1-1 draw here, which will put an end to a losing run anyway for Bristol Rovers, if not necessarily a win, which is what they're probably desperately crying out for at the moment. Bromley versus Crawley Town. Only 1 loss in the last 5 games for Crawley. They've slowly managed to stabilise themselves a bit. They still need a few more games to go before they're properly clear of that relegation mess. But I wouldn't suspect at this moment in time that they will be relegated. Interestingly enough, Bromley are in the playoffs. They've also only had 1 loss in the last 5, but they also have 4 wins as their unbeaten run, which has seen them sitting nice and pretty in 5th place in the table. So you wouldn't be too surprised if they do manage to get playoffs coming into the season. But I'm going to go with a cheeky 2-1 win for Crawley Town. I just don't see Crawley necessarily getting relegated this season. Cambridge United versus Chesterfield. Cambridge have been doing quite well recently. 1 defeat in the last 6. They're now in the playoffs. A few more good performances and they'll definitely be candidates for the playoffs at least this season. Chesterfield have slightly dropped off of late. Too many draws is their problem at the moment and just not up for the cup games either. Getting knocked out of the EFL Trophy and the FA Cup last week in both to Doncaster Rovers, interestingly enough. Yeah, I think Cambridge win this one 2-1. Questions being started to ask, I think, over Chesterfield's ability. I did tip them at 1 point to get to the playoffs. Fleetwood Town versus Salford City. 13th versus 8th, but only 3 points separating them. And actually, arguably on goal-scoring positions, Fleetwood are a better team. So it is going to be an interesting one, and I think quite an even one. A 2-2 draw is what I'm going to go with in this one. Like you can't even discredit teams like Fleetwood or Barnet getting into the playoffs at the moment, all the way down in 13th and 14th. It's still quite wide open. Harrogate Town versus Accrington Stanley. Considering how poor Harrogate have been of late, they need to get a win. That's the only really acceptable thing. Although Accrington have had a good run of form, 5 games unbeaten, 3 of them are draws, and they're, I wouldn't say easy pickings because no team is easy pickings, but if you're going to get a win, it's got to be against the likes of Accrington Stanley. So I think at home, Harrogate do win this in the War of the Roses fashion, 2-1 to Harrogate Town. I don't suspect they get relegated this season, Harrogate. I think they're slightly too good to be able to. But weirder things have happened in football. Notts County versus MK Dons. 3rd versus 4th. 1 point separating these two teams. A huge game in the wider schemes of League Two, to be honest. Because whoever loses this suddenly loses quite a lot of their momentum and maybe even falls out of the playoffs. I think Notts County have the home advantage here and win this one 3-0. I would certainly suspect that Notts County get automatic promotion. My current 3 for automatic promotion would be Walsall, MK Dons and Notts County, because I can't see Swindon Town maintaining this form, but they could definitely surprise me as well. Shrewsbury Town versus Grimsby Town. 12th place Grimsby, they've now not won a game in the league in the last 5 games, which has seen them slightly fall away from the playoffs. But if they can pick their momentum back up where they had from the beginning of the season, they're certainly, for me, playoff contenders. However, they're still on that bad run of form, and Shrewsbury had a bit of an uplift, managed to get them out of the relegation zone, and I think they get a cheeky 1-0 win at home here. Swindon Town versus Cheltenham Town. A bit of a local rivalry, maybe. Just across the Cotswolds, separating these two teams. And Swindon are unbeaten in a long time, actually, and have progressed through to the 3rd round of the FA Cup. They beat Bolton 4-0 in the FA Cup, which was quite something. But yeah, they're up against Cheltenham, who are just above the relegation zone. Maybe a fairly competitive end-to-end game. I'm going to go with 3-3 draw, which seems unlikely, but, you know, we've done crazier things in the past, haven't we? There's an EFL trophy game as well midweek. We've got Colchester United hosting West Ham United's under-21s. No idea why this is happening now, but it is. And I think Colchester lose this one 4-0. I think West Ham United's under-21s being a symbolic only under-21s team left, I believe, in this tournament to get the honours. Leamington versus AFC Telford United in the National League North. This one could be an interesting one. It's definitely a relegation 6-pointer. 16th place AFC Telford United versus Leamington, who are bottom of the league. If Leamington are going to get a win again, they've got to do it here. Because of the 5 defeats in a row for Leamington, it's not looking good. It's not looking good for the Warwickshire side. And I think they could maybe end that run with a 1-1 draw here. All even in this all West Midlands encounter. Scarborough Athletic versus Hereford. Hereford are just the relegation zone on 7 goals on goal difference, so they wouldn't be relegated on goal difference at the moment. But they're certainly not a team that I'm full of confidence at the moment with, especially seeing they're approaching a Scarborough team unbeaten in the last 4, although 3 of them are draws, but in 6th place in playoffs. They need to just solidify their slightly precarious position in the playoffs at the moment, because it is very close up there. 1-0 to Scarborough Athletic. Why not? We'll go with a cheeky win for the Yorkshire side. Weston-super-Mare versus Worthing. And Weston-super-Mare is 4th, Worthing a 2nd, both on 39 points, both 3 points off the top of the league. This is a huge game in the National League South for promotion purposes, because, you know what, this will probably be Worthing's game in hand, but Weston-super-Mare will have another game in hand as well after this. But it certainly then means that they seize the initiative. At the moment, I'd say that Worthing are most likely to clinch that title spot. They're the highest scorers in the league and got a decent defence as well as only 20 goals conceded. I'm going to go with a wild 4-3 win for Worthing, putting them top of the league at the end of this match. Bayer Leverkusen versus Newcastle United in the Champions League. It's going to be an interesting one. This one, Newcastle need to win, in my opinion, and I think they will, to be able to qualify automatically for the next round. They seem very much focused on the Champions League this season, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, and they are up against a decent enough Bayer Leverkusen side, but there's definitely a side that is going to have to settle for the playoffs. I just can't see them qualifying automatically. So yeah, 3-1 to Newcastle United in this one. Club Brugge versus Arsenal. Arsenal have been impeccable so far in the Champions League, so maybe might just take their eye off this competition a bit and rest a few players and maybe put some youngsters in. Thinking maybe it's a bit of a formality up against the Belgium side. The Bruges are 2 points off the playoffs for it, so I think they're going to put on a better performance maybe. A 0-0 draw is what I'm going to go with in this one. Not the greatest performance from the Gunners, but it's still not going to create too many headaches for Arsene Wenger, not Arsene Wenger. What the flip? Mikel Arteta. I'm going back to 2004 with Arsene Wenger at Arsenal. Uh, Real Madrid are taking on Manchester City. What some people may tout as two of the best teams in the world, other people may say this might be the Champions League final. Whatever way you're looking at it, these two teams are absolute world class. Their team all the way throughout is just screaming quality. Interestingly enough, though, Manchester City are not quite automatically qualifying yet. They're only outside on goal difference behind Sporting, which makes this game quite important, but also quite difficult. 3-1 to a Real Madrid team, in my viewpoint. I just think they're the best team in the world right now, Real Madrid, and they are more than capable of winning this tournament. Bristol City versus Leicester City, which Bristol City just outside the playoffs on a point, or by a singular point, and up against a Leicester side that 3 points off the playoffs, but sitting down in 14th. I'm going to go with Bristol to win this one at Ashton Gate. 1-0 to the Robins. Derby County versus Millwall. Very mid-table at the moment, Derby. We win some, we lose some. I'm not confident at all going into this game, in all honesty. With 4 points off the playoffs, which I don't think we'll get this season. I think I'll be content with a mid-table finish. Around about that 15th is actually roughly where I suspect we're going to finish at the moment in time. But we're up against a strong Millwall side who are challenging for automatic promotion, who don't score a lot of goals but have a darn good defence. They've won 3 games in a row, and I think they're going to get another one here. 1-0 to Millwall, but I really hope I'm wrong in that, and that Derby gain the win. Ipswich Town versus Stoke City. I'm saying it now, Ipswich Town are probably going to get automatically promoted. They've beaten Coventry, who are the best team in the league. Who is going to stop the Tractor Boys getting an instant return now? Well, maybe their form hasn't been the greatest, but 5 points off the automatic zone, and I think they definitely have the capability if they click into gear. This is a difficult game against Stoke in 6th. But it'll be a real statement if Ipswich go from beating Cov to beating Stoke. I'm going to go a 2-0 win to Ipswich Town. They're at home as well. Certainly making themselves clear that they are not here just to make up the numbers. Hull City versus Wrexham. Interesting enough, Hull City have sort of faded away a bit over the last few weeks. They're now sitting in 9th, which is still not impossible for this playoffs. 2 points off it. But they need to change. Have a bit of a shake-up, maybe, if they want to continue the way they're going. They're hosting Wrexham, though, who are very, very solid at the moment and have got the news that Apollos Investment has invested in the club, as well as Welsh Government full funding for the new stadium design for COP. All a bit odd going on there at Wrexham at the moment. I'm really not sure what's going on. It doesn't look great. It looks a bit unstable, if you ask me, whereas other people probably view it as positive news for the club getting yet more investment. But do they need any more? I'm not sure. But I think 2-1 to Hull City is going to be the likely outcome in this one at the KCOM Stadium. Rotherham United versus Blackpool. Blackpool in the relegation zone still. It's just not good enough for Blackpool, and Rotherham are unbeaten in a fairly long time now. And I think another win for Rotherham in this one. 2-1 for Rotherham United. I just can't see Blackpool getting a result in another Lancashire v Yorkshire affair. Crewe Alexandra versus Newport County. Yeah, Crewe, they at one point were looking like they're going to get playoffs now, less likely. Bit of a similar problem maybe to Chesterfield, just a bit too many draws in this. Well, not really. A bit too many defeats maybe in the draw side. 7 defeats, 8 wins and 3 draws. They're up against Newport, who are bottom of the league, but they have had a recent change around. They've got Christian Fuchs, of all players, as their manager now, the ex Leicester legend, really. We'll see how his foray into management goes, but I reckon they can actually get something here. 3-0 to Newport County. There's clearly a project they're trying to build upon at the Exiles, but I just don't see it working at the moment. Oldham Athletic versus Walsall. Oldham very mid-table at the moment. And I think they could go up a few places. But yeah, up against this very strong Walsall side. Walsall, I saw them this weekend. They didn't look particularly good, to be honest, actually, up against Gateshead. I just think Gateshead never made anything count. And I think the defensive aspect of Walsall is really what they're sort of relying on. Only 18 goals conceded, so that's only 1 goal conceded a game. We go a 3-1 win for Walsall here. They're very much focused, I think, on the league as well. But you never know. Might have a decent enough run in the FA Cup as well. Carlisle United versus Woking. Is this a National League game on a Wednesday, which is always a bit bizarre, isn't it? How often does that happen? Anyway, Carlisle are hosting Woking in this one. And Carlisle, I think there's a hugely competitive National League title at the moment. First down to fifths are separated by 2 points. It could be really anyone's for the taking, and I think Carlisle do win this one up against a Woking side that, yes, are very good at the moment and actually looking to be playoff challengers. Maybe I think they still need a few good performances to be able to do that. But yeah, Carlisle, comfortable dominance, 5-1 for the Cumbrian side, putting them top of the league and helps their goal difference out quite a lot as well. Kings Lynn Town versus Macclesfield in the National League North, also on a Wednesday night, interestingly enough. Yeah, both of these two teams in mid-table, 14th versus 15th. There's a lot of games in hands at the moment, or a lot of games in hands for Macclesfield at the moment. 4 games for about half a division. And if you include Oxford City, it'll be 5 games, but we're not really too bothered about them at the moment. So yeah, they've had 3 games more played than Kings Lynn Town. There's certainly, with all them games in hands, they do say you have to win them, but if they do, they're certainly not going to be missing out on the playoffs as they currently look like in mid-table. And they also had a really decent FA Cup performance, getting through to the 3rd round as well for the first time in the club's rebirthed history. I know with a 1-1 draw though in this one, they've not done as well in the league recently, and Kings Lynn have actually done quite a good job. So I think it could be quite an interesting one. Utrecht versus Forest will go a 0-0 draw in this Europa League encounter. I just hope Utrecht win. Basel versus Aston Villa, the Swiss side. I'm going to go with a 1-1 draw in this one. Maybe a little bit of a shock, but you know what? Why not? And I think even more of a shock is Shelbourne, who are going to scrap a 0-0 with Crystal Palace, which is maybe a bold statement, but it's a bold statement we're making nevertheless. West Bromwich versus Sheffield United on the Friday night game, this one, which is an interesting one. They decided to choose this television. I'm not entirely too sure, but there's only 3 points separating these two teams, and I think they're roughly same quality on paper. We'll go with a 2-2 draw in this one. A very entertaining game, but ultimately the spoils are shared. Chelsea versus Everton on to Saturday, which is always our favourite day, isn't it? Saturday watching some football. Nothing better than it. And Everton, maybe sneaky European contenders. David Moyes has certainly got his team looking very strong at the moment. In 7th place, 1 point off the Europa League, 2 points off the Champions League. They need to improve their goal difference. They need to score a lot more, get a recognised striker, and that Everton team are going to do absolutely immense this season. But Chelsea, come on, they're a decent team. They're no mugs either. I'm going to go with a 1-0 scrappy win for Chelsea. But I wouldn't be surprised if it necessarily goes the other way. Liverpool versus Brighton and Hove Albion. 8th versus 10th. Can you guess which one's which? Brighton in 8th, Liverpool in 10th. Really poor Liverpool at the moment. But I think Slot needs this. And does he bring Salah back into this game? There seems to be a bit of a controversy around him benching Salah for the last 3 games in a row. 2-1 for Liverpool. They're on the same amount of points. Essentially, Liverpool need to win this. Because at the moment, they're looking at the mid-table side. I'm not going to lie. Burnley versus Fulham. Burnley in 19th, Fulham in 15th. 7 points separating them, and Burnley on a horrendous run of form. Burnley needs to make a change. I think they were so good last season, and it's concerning in a sense. It's a Scott Parker derby as well. He used to play and manage Fulham. He's a bit of a legend in Fulham, Scott Parker, to be honest. But now he's at Burnley, and I can't lie, it's not looking good for Burnley. They had such a good early momentum, but since then, nah. But I'm going to go with 2-2 draw here. If we're going to get a result of any sorts, it's going to be against Fulham, isn't it? Who aren't the greatest at the moment. Sometimes you just need to start punching up a bit. Arsenal versus Wolverhampton Wanderers. Wolves have been sort of courting all the national media's attention of how bad they've been in the last week or so, about how they're currently on track of beating Derby's worst points record. We were here last season with Southampton, so I'm not going to get too carried away in that sort of levels of conversation, but they're almost certainly going to lose against the current top of the league title challengers, and definitely maybe likely to get the title. It's between them and City, I think, at the moment. I don't think anyone else is going to come close. But 2-0 to Arsenal, pretty routine win for the Gunners. Norwich City versus Southampton. Norwich in relegation zone, as we were referring to earlier. Southampton are going to, I think, go on a crazy run and get to the playoffs this season. That's all what happens if you're good at this time of year, you know, a festive period where the games come quick and thick and fast. Then if you can get results week after week, then suddenly you've put yourself into a very fine position. I'm going to go 3-0 to Southampton, back-to-back wins in the Championship, making it, it will be 7 wins in the last 8 games. Really good run of form that would be. Oxford United versus Preston North End. There's a slight inconsistency, I think, with Preston, and they remind me a bit of a Derby side from a few years ago. They do well against the stronger teams, but then come undone against the weaker teams. And I think Oxford could potentially win this one 3-1 at the Kassam Stadium, which is a bit of a surprise fixture result prediction, whatever you want to call it, that I'm going with. But stranger things have happened. Stoke City versus Swansea City. Swansea in 20th. Will they be for much longer? Who knows? But Stoke are a strong team, and they'll be wanting to get into playoffs this season. I think I'm pretty comfortable saying that they're going to get playoffs this season, even though they're only 6th. They just need to get back into form and momentum, and I think they win this one 3-1 to Stoke City. Have a bet 365. On to Birmingham City versus Charlton Athletic. I think things are going to go from bad for worse at Charlton. They're going to record a 6th consecutive defeat. It would be in this one, and I'm going to go with a 1-0 win for Birmingham City. Some tough games that Charlton have in this little run here. Coventry City versus Bristol City. Coventry, I think, will get back to winning ways here. After a couple of defeats, we'll go with a 1-0 win for Coventry City, which maybe makes some of the nervous Coventry fans. I think you get to the point where, you're top of the league in November. It's always a precarious position to be in and does create quite a lot of nerves because it's still a long way to go. And also, suddenly you get a lot more injuries over winter. You get maybe postponements, or the January transfer window can suddenly mean that all their squad gets wrecked. It's coming into the period of time where things will start getting towards the people who are top of the league, and there'll be a bit of a change. And whether they can weather that storm, getting it through to that tail end of the season, that sort of final 10 games, which is what's often needed, is a very important thing to consider. So we'll be covering all of that on the channel coming up. But yeah, a 1-0 win for Coventry here. Leicester versus Ipswich. I'm going to home advantage. Both these two teams in the Premier League last season. I did say earlier that I thought Ipswich were going to do well, but I think Leicester, you can't ever rule out Leicester being really competitive in the Championship. You'd be stupid to do so. But yeah, 2-0 to Leicester City. Middlesbrough versus QPR. And I think Borough suddenly start going on a bit of a form, picking up wins here, there, and everywhere. 2-1 to Middlesbrough in this one. And another 3 points for the Teesside. As Millwall versus Hull City. I think this could be a very close game because I think Millwall aren't as good as the league table necessarily suggests. I don't think they're necessarily a third-placed team. 23 goals scored is not good enough to be in the playoffs. 25 goals conceded is even now looking a bit more shaky. So yeah, I think we're going to see a 1-0 win, a scrappy 1-0 win for Hull City. Because every game that Millwall are playing in at the moment is a bit of a scrap. It's always by narrow margins. They've managed to get a bit of success off that, and it is a very routine Alex Neil side, if we're going to be honest. They're always quite compact and defensive. Yeah, on to Portsmouth versus Blackburn Rovers. Yeah, Portsmouth, not great at the moment. They've got a game in hand, admittedly, above Oxford, so could get themselves out of relegation zone with a win in that, necessarily. Fratton Park normally becomes a bit more strong at this time. A strong fan base as well. And up against a Blackburn team, which isn't always the strongest, we're going to go with a scrappy 1-0 win for Pompey. They'll make it a duel not to make sure that they go down. Wrexham versus Watford. 12th versus 13th. Two very mid-table teams, but two which are on a bit of a good run of form, actually. Since Watford have made the managerial change to bring in Javi Garcia, they have actually been much improved. Which is surprised I didn't know too much about Javi Garcia coming into this. But yeah, 40% win percentage, 4 wins, 3 draws, 3 losses. It's a decent run of form. I'm going another draw in this one. A 1-1 draw. To the draw specialists for Wrexham, we've got 9 draws this season, which is more than anyone else in the division. AFC Wimbledon versus Mansfield Town. Yeah, I think Wimbledon get back to competing towards the playoffs and make it a back-to-back wins in this one as they win 2-1 up against Mansfield Town. It'd be mad to see a playoffs consisting of like Stevenage, Lincoln, Stockport, and Wimbledon. Like, if Bolton fall out to Wimbledon, and I think that'd just be a mad playoffs because that means that at least one of them teams is going to be, for the first time in either a very long time or ever, into the second tier. Because I know Lincoln and Stockport had been in the second tier in the past, and depends if you want to refer to AFC Wimbledon as sort of a different club or whether they're the same club as the original Wimbledon. It's all sorts of controversy around that, which I don't really want to get into too much. But they would probably argue Heritage from Wimbledon to be the first team to play at least from Wimbledon for at least 20 years, I think, now in the second tier. Huddersfield Town versus Wigan Athletic. Huddersfield 2 points off the playoffs. So, although Wigan are on a really good run of form, they're slowly getting results. Really quite surprising, actually, in a sense. But yeah, I think Huddersfield nick this one 1-0. It's only across the Peak District. It's not too far away from each other, these two. Peak District, Pennines, depending on what you want to call it. But yeah, it's not too far of a distance, actually. So maybe a bit of a local rivalry going on. Barnsley versus Leyton Orient. I think we're going to go with a shock win for Leyton Orient here. Very comfortable as well. 4-0 to Leyton Orient. They score goals. Don't get me wrong, Leyton Orient scored 29 goals this season, which is the 3rd best in the league. They just can't keep them out. So yeah, 4-0 for Leyton Orient. Blackpool versus Lincoln City. I think a poor performance maybe from Lincoln standards as they're going to be held to a 1-1 draw travelling to Blackpool in this one. Although, as they do say, if you win your home games, draw your away games, then things aren't actually too bad. And that would be enough to get you definitely towards the playoff finish. Bolton Wanderers versus Exeter City. I reckon that Bolton maybe slip up in this one up against an Exeter side that I think they're a bit low for maybe where their standards are. I could certainly see them rising a couple of places. 2-0 to Exeter City in this one. Bradford City versus Reading. Two decent teams on form. Well, yeah, relatively speaking, I'd say both of these two teams on form. Bradford in second. Reading are in 17th, but I wouldn't be surprised if we suddenly started seeing Reading putting together a really strong side and a push, maybe a late push for the playoffs. Because Liam Richardson, I did say he does know how to get results in this at this level. 0-0 draw in this one. Burton Albion versus Wycombe Wanderers. Despite how good Burton were before, they've now had back-to-back losses and Wycombe on such a good run of form. I'm going to have to back Wycombe to win this one. 3-2 to Wycombe Wanderers. I'm flip-flopping between whether Burton are going to be relegated or not this season because I think they could likely be the ones that are victim to Peterborough's survival, as I was mentioning earlier. But then again, they could manage to stay up. It wouldn't surprise me if Burton left it to the last day and managed to stay up in the last day. That is a very Burton thing to do. Cardiff City versus Doncaster Rovers. Another team down there is Doncaster Rovers, who also may be in danger of being involved in a relegation battle. And I think Cardiff are very comfortably going to win this. They're at home as well. 2-0 to Cardiff City. They're a very strong team. Luton Town versus Port Vale. Despite what I've got as Port Vale's good performance in midweek, I can't see Luton getting anything other than a win in this one. 2-0 to the Hatters. It's amazing to think that they were only relatively recently in the Premier League and now they're competing out in League One. It really is a wild pyramid at the moment. Peterborough United versus Northampton Town in the Nene Derby. Northampton, I think, comfortably win this. Peterborough never seem to be up for this game. Northampton always do. 4-0 to Northampton Town. I think Peterborough probably consider Cambridge more as their rivals, whereas Northampton definitely view Peterborough as their main rivals. Although Northampton versus Luton wouldn't be a too bad rivalry, or Northampton versus MK Dons as well. They've got a few which surround them. Plymouth Argyle versus Rotherham United. Maybe a bit of an upset, maybe. We could see Plymouth upsetting the apple cart and winning this one, which may be a bit of a surprise prediction, maybe. But I'm going to go with a 3-2 win for Plymouth Argyle in this one. Yeah, beating that unbeaten run for Rotherham would be immense and there's a lot of confidence for the club. Stockport County versus Stevenage. It's hard to tell which way this one's going to go. So I'm going to go home advantage. I am going to go a comfortable 3-0 win for Stockport County. I don't know if either of these two teams can hold on to the form that they currently have to get playoffs. But it'd be mental if Stevenage even managed to clutch it up and get automatic promotion, wouldn't it? Yeah. Bristol Rovers versus Swindon Town. Another semi-local rivalry on this one. And I'm going to go maybe a surprise win for Bristol Rovers. I think that draw up against Barnet I got predicted in midweek will do them a whole bunch of confidence. And suddenly goals start coming and they start scoring and they win. 3-0 for Swindon Town, which is probably the most ballsy prediction that I could have made. But I'm doing it regardless. Salford City versus Colchester United. Colchester are a decent team. They're unbeaten the last 4 games. But you know what? Salford, they were impressive in the FA Cup in the last weekend, and I do think they could definitely sneak into the playoffs. 4-1 to Salford City. In this one, they're at home as well at the Peninsula Stadium, so that does give them an edge and an advantage as well. Accrington Stanley versus Bromley. I think Bromley get back to winning ways after a couple of defeats in this one against an Accrington Stanley team that I can't see feasibly being more than a mid-table team. at this moment in time. So yeah, 2-1 to Bromley in this one. Cheltenham Town versus Harrogate Town, a relegation 6-pointer, a point separating these two teams, and that dotted line as well. Cheltenham just above Harrogate, who are currently in relegation zone. So a huge 6-pointer in the grand schemes of things in League 2. And I think home advantage will pay dividends in this one. At Whaddon Road, a 1-0 win for Cheltenham Town, which would be surely one of the best results for them this season, Cheltenham. Although we've still got a long way to go, will do a huge deal of confidence for the Robins. Chesterfield versus Barnet. I've not been convinced at Barnet of late. They've been a bit off the boil. I don't think these two teams are actually too different. And I wouldn't be surprised if this does end up in a draw. But I'm going to go with a Chesterfield winner. I think they go back to winning ways and win 2-1. A last-minute winner for Chesterfield after a fairly even game. Crawley Town versus Oldham Athletic. Yeah, I think could be a fairly close one. 19th versus 16th. Now, there is a bit of a gulf in points tally, maybe, with 6 points between these two teams. But performances on paper, I don't think are too much difference. Crawley score more goals, but Oldham have got an incredible defence. Best defence in the league. Only conceding 13 goals in 18 games is a ridiculously good defence. But I'm going to go a 2-2 draw in this game here. Gillingham versus Barrow. Yeah, I can't see anyone other than Gillingham winning this. They're at home at Priestfield. They're unbeaten in the last 5. Well, a lot of draws in that run there. 4 draws in a row, actually, in the last 4 games. But yeah, it's got to be Gillingham for me to win this one. They're definitely going to get playoffs this season. 2-0 to Gillingham. Grimsby Town versus Notts County. I reckon this is going to be another win for Notts County. As I said earlier on in the video, I think they do get automatic promotion. And up against a Grimsby team, which is decent but is fading away a bit. 2-0 to Notts County. MK Dons versus Cambridge United. Although Cambridge are doing decently at the moment, I think in a semi-local area, we're not too far away from each other, actually. I think MK Dons definitely edge it out. 3 points separating them, but I think MK Dons top scorers in the league at the moment at 35 goals. Paul Warren is a specialist at getting promotions from this lower levels. 1-0 to MK Dons. Newport County versus Fleetwood Town. Fleetwood are sort of slowly moving down the table in the wrong direction. And I think, Christian Fuchs does actually do some decent raising standards. So I'm going to go 4 points lost the last 2 games in this one. So I'm going to go a 0-0 draw in this one. Certainly back to basics, but it wouldn't be too bad for them to start putting some performances on now. Tranmere Rovers versus Crewe Alexandra. They have already played each other in the EFL Trophy, I believe, this season. Tranmere are always difficult to figure out where they're going to be. They're currently in 15th, so they could definitely finish higher, but they could also maybe finish a position or so lower. That mid-table position is roughly where you'd imagine Tranmere to be at the moment. They're hosting Crewe. Yeah, let's go with a Tranmere win. They only had 1 loss in the last 6 games. We'll go with a 2-0 win for Tranmere Rovers. Why ever not in this? It's actually quite close teams in this one, actually. Both historically in Cheshire, anyway. Tranmere are now in Merseyside, but not far at all to travel between these two teams. Walsall versus Shrewsbury Town. Shrewsbury have just drawn Wolverhampton Wanderers in the FA Cup as well, so that's going to be a huge game for them. But this is also a bit of a local rivalry in this one, and it's definitely one I imagine Walsall are going to win with ease. 3-0 to Walsall. Their team knows how to get results at this level, and they've got a very decent squad. Matt Sadler being the manager of the Sadlers, I just find that a great fact every single time. But he's a good manager. And they've got the likes of Aidan Flint, Albert Adoma, which, if you go back, Jamie Jellis as well, decent names going on there. Courtney Clark, Charlie Lakin, Kemar Roof, all these sort of very much big names back in a fair few years ago now, but I think they're certainly a side that is built with experience in mind. Okay, on to some FA Trophy games. We do love a good deal of FA Trophy games. We're not going to do all of them. We're going to miss a couple because otherwise this video will go on for over 2 hours, and I can't be bothered to speak for that long, and you probably can't be bothered to listen to me for that long. So start with Ebbsfleet United versus Braintree Town. Bit of an Essex derby. This one, a league separating them. But yeah, I think Braintree narrowly win this one. 1-0 to Braintree Town. Not much, I believe, separates these two teams actually on paper. But yeah, a league and a heart maybe does. AFC Telford United versus Altrincham. Yeah, I think this is going to be a very even game in reality. I think a 2-2 draw. It's at the New Bucks Head, and I think Telford could go on a bit of a trophy run, and I think Telford win on penalties up against Altrincham, which are historically a huge team. They've won the Alliance Premier League back in the day, wasn't it? That they won that, but they've also reached they've done fairly well in the FA Trophy in the past. So yeah, I think it would be a bit of a scout maybe for Telford to get past this one. I think they do. Alvechurch versus Alfreton Town. I think this is going to be a narrow 0-0 draw, but Alfreton to win on penalties. I don't know if Alfreton are necessarily bothered about this competition this season. They're just wanting to stay up in the league, and I think that would be content for them. Because, just adding fixtures just creates more difficulties, doesn't it? Boreham Wood versus Brackley Town. Ironically, if Brackley progressed past Burton, which they did not, unfortunately, they would have been playing each other in the FA Cup. However, they're not. They're going to be playing each other in the FA Trophy, though. And I think Boreham Wood do win this one. They're a very decent team at the moment, and I think some silverware is due to come to Boreham Wood. They've not had... this would probably be their best honour, I would say. Would be them to winning this. They've never won the FA Trophy before. The furthest they reached was the semi-finals in 2005-06. So yeah, why not win it this season? 3-1 to Boreham Wood. Some good heritage go towards the club if that happens. Clitheroe versus York City. I go a 0-0 draw, but I do think York City slot home the penalties. But I don't think York City can take this competition that seriously. They're going to be focused on trying to get promotion from the National League. So yeah, I think they're more than content to play a second fiddle string team in this one. Hence why I think Clitheroe could take it to penalties. Curzon Ashton versus Marine. I think, Marine, they're always up for a good cup run. They did well in the FA Cups for the last couple of years or a few seasons in recent memory. But I think... See, they didn't necessarily do as well this time round in the competition. They'll be wanting to try and make national headlines by winning this, or at least going deep into it. So 1-0 to Marine in this one. A bit of a scrappy one. But yeah. Dagenham and Redbridge versus Hanwell Town. I think Dagenham and Redbridge maybe underestimate maybe Hanwell here and take it to a penalty shootout after a 0-0 draw. Dagenham and Redbridge will progress on penalties. Dorking Wanderers versus Bath City, an all-National League South campaign in this one. Dorking, I think, will want to prove themselves worthy enough to be able to compete in the league above. After a few seasons of maybe flip-flopping between the two, I think Dorking wants to stabilise themselves, and a good trophy one can help them do this. 1-0 to Dorking Wanderers. Dover Athletic versus Hornchurch. I think Hornchurch very much focus on getting that National League South title, and therefore Dover win this one. 1-0 to Dover Athletic. Eastleigh versus Aldershot Town in a Hampshire derby. Aldershot definitely will be focused about trying to stay up in this league. Eastleigh really don't have anything to play for. They always seem to be in a bit of a mid-table predicament. So yeah, 2-0 to Eastleigh, and local bragging rights for the Hampshire derby going southwards. Forest Green Rovers versus Weston-super-Mare. They've not actually played each other since, I believe it's the 1990s in the Southern League. which is mad to think, consider other than friendlies, considering how geographically close they are to each other. Yeah, I think Forest Green Rovers, if they can win the double, that would truly be a great season for Forest Green Rovers. And I think they're going to win this one. They're two very strong teams, and Western-super-Mare, I don't know if they necessarily want to be in both cups at the same time, because they obviously progressed in the FA Cup up against Chelmsford City to get to the third round for the first time ever. So yeah, 1-0 to Forest Green Rovers. Gateshead versus Morecambe. Both of these need a win just to boost some confidence in the club. Gateshead are a club bereft of confidence at the moment, and Morecambe, I think, are a side that, you know what, they're also struggling down there in the National League for a few more justifiable reasons. But yeah, both of these two teams are absolutely dire at the moment. 4-1 to Morecambe, we're going to go with. Which I probably would have rather have won that in the league. But yeah, I think in the trophy, Morecambe go through to the next round. Gloucester City versus Worthing. A very interesting one. Gloucester, historically, been in National League North for a fair few seasons. But Worthing looking for a title this season. So maybe playing a slightly weaker team up against the Southern League side. I'm going 0-0 draw, but I do think Worthing to win it on penalties. FC Halifax Town versus SC United on Manchester. The battle of the FCs at the front of the name as opposed to the end of the name. It's going to be an interesting one, I think. But yeah, I can't see SC United causing a huge upset. There's a couple of leagues apart, and so if United do get past this Yorkshire-based side, and it would certainly be an upset, especially seeing how well FC Halifax do at this competition. They do seem to love it. And to be fair, another team that I would not be surprised if they win it again. They won it in 2015-16, and they won it in 2022-23. If they win it again, that makes them equal to the most amount of the times winning this competition. So yeah, 3-1 to FC Halifax Town. Harbour Town versus Carlisle United. Harbour are loving pushing up and going on some of these cup runs. How many league games have Harbour actually played this season? What league are Harbour even in? They're currently in the Southern League Premier Division Central. They finished in the playoffs last season. How many games have they played this season, Harbour? They're currently second in the league, but have played 18 games compared to Spalding's 21. They could definitely get promoted to the National League South. It would probably National League North, wouldn't it? But yeah, I think they're going to be determined to prove themselves worthy adversaries. I'm going 0-0 draw, but I do think Carlisle finally bring on some super subs and win on penalties. A bit similar in this one is Hartlepool United versus Anstey Nomads. But the thing with Anstey Nomads, this would be an even more climbing up and defeating, because Anstey Nomads believe in Tier 8. They're one of the few Tier 8 teams left in this competition. A 0-0 draw, but I do think Hartlepool do become the team to pass on penalties, unfortunately for the Leicestershire-based village. Hemel Hempstead Town versus Horsham. I think this will be a fairly even game. Both will probably want to be going for it. A 1-1 draw and a Hemel Hempstead win on penalties, which could well be how a playoff final in the National League South is decided. Hereford versus Radcliffe. Hereford will just be wanting to prove themselves, maybe. A 3-3 draw, but Radcliffe to win on penalties in this one. Especially seeing Radcliffe, I found out last night, were knocked out of the Manchester Senior County Cup. And they were fuming about it, to be honest, because they only found out yesterday, and the match was meant to go on today. So they've had a right pop off at the Manchester FA because, it does take time to prepare the pitch and all that. And, you go and train and stuff, and you get all the ideas and you do all the research. And it is a bit stupid to have left it so late. So I think Radcliffe, understandably, a bit annoyed about that. But they are threatening to withdraw from the Manchester FA, which feels a bit of an extreme response. But we'll see how that ends up going. Leamington versus Rochdale. Rochdale are winning this. If Rochdale get the double, that would be very interesting. But 2-0 to Rochdale in this one. Scunthorpe United versus Peterborough Sports. There's always a bit of a spat in this one, isn't there? It's a Lincolnshire versus Cambridgeshire, although there's a fair whack of a country to go in this one. But yeah, Scunthorpe, they're doing so well at the moment, and I think they just batter Peterborough, who are doing the opposite of well, of very badly in National League North. 5-0 to Scunthorpe United, using it as target practice. Solihull Moors versus AFC Fylde. Fylde have routinely, for me, just proven they're not strong enough to take against National League oppositions. And I think Solihull win this one. 4-1. Solihull Moors actually reached the FA Trophy final, didn't they? Relatively recently. In 2023-24, and they lost it to Gateshead. But yeah, they loved that. I think they're a bit of an admirer of a competition. Would love to win it. South Shields versus Macclesfield. Well, Macclesfield are clearly loving a cup run. They've done it in the FA Cup. Why are we not going to do it in the FA Trophy? I don't see any reason why not. 1-0 to Macclesfield in this one, as they managed to get themselves in the hat for the next round. They'll be wanting to draw up against Forest Green Rovers. Imagine the scenes if that happens. Robbie Savage deserting Macclesfield, obviously, to go to Forest Green. So, yeah, that would be an interesting what happened. Southend United versus Truro City. Truro just need to focus about getting the heck out of that relegation zone, which they're currently not doing. And Southend, they're focusing on playoffs, but I think they'll narrowly win this one. It's a 1-0 win. I'm going to go with for Southend. Southport versus Leek Town. Leek Town, another solid team to have managed to reach it this far into the competition. They're currently in the Northern Premier League Premier Division, but a mid-table team, realistically, at the moment at this level. They were at one point in the National League, I believe. But yeah, how are Leek doing? 14th. You know, they're not that good, but you know, if they start drafting together a good trophy run, then it'll be all right. And Southport are not doing great this season. However, I do think Southport need to get a win, and I think they need it sooner rather than later. 3-1 to Southport. Tamworth versus Boston United. I think Boston might fancy their chances a bit in this one. 3-1 for Boston United. Both these two teams, I think, could win it, though. Walton and Hersham versus Sutton United. It's got to be a Sutton United win in this relatively local derby for me. But yeah, Sutton done well in the FA Cup, only narrowly missed out to Shrewsbury Town, as we had in a live watch along, didn't we? So 2-0 to Sutton United in this one. Wealdstone versus Cheshunt. Well, I think Wealdstone might want to win the FA Trophy, actually. They are a team that is synonymous with winning the trophy. They won it in... What year was it that they won it in? 1984-85, and they won the FA Amateur Cup in 1965-66. I don't know if it was the FA Trophy or whether it was the FA Amateur Cup, but I knew somebody who actually has that trophy in their loft. For some reason. I have no idea why somebody in Derby has ended up with that cup. But so that's an interesting niche bit of trivia. Yeah, I think Wealdstone could win this one. 5-2 to Wealdstone. Cheshunt, a few leagues below, and I don't think could really hurt them that much. Woking are one of the highest winners of the FA Trophy. They have won it 3 times, actually, which is it's Scarborough, Telford United, and Woking have all won it 3 times. Scarborough is no longer in existence, and neither is Telford United. So Woking is technically the only one left. So if Woking win it, then they are going to outright get that claim of winning the most amount of FA trophies, which maybe is what they'll be wanting to do. But against Toten's not going to be easy. I'm going to go 0-0 draw, but I'm going to go Woking to win on penalties. Worksop Town versus Kidderminster Harriers. I don't know if either of these teams necessarily want it. We've both got respective things to be more focused on this season. A 1-1 draw, but Kidderminster Harriers to win on penalties. Yeovil Town versus Maidstone United. National League versus National League South. I think it's going to be a very even game, actually. A 1-1 draw, and I do think Maidstone are going to cause an upset and win on the lottery that is the penalty shootout. Onto the National League North. It's just for one game because of the FA Trophy games. Spennymoor Town versus Buxton. I'll see what I'm doing. If I've got time, I might head down to Spennymoor and go and watch this game. But it's a bit of a difficult trek by public transport from Newcastle. But if I can, I'll see. But I'm going to go with a 1-1 draw in this one. Both of these two teams will be having half an eye on the playoffs. Eastbourne Borough versus Chelmsford City. Yeah, Eastbourne, I think we're going to see a bit of a shock. Everyone's eyes will be on the FA Trophy this weekend. So Eastbourne to win against Chelmsford when the cameras maybe, well, the fans aren't necessarily as focused as much on that. A 2-1 win for Eastbourne Borough. Bit of a shock in that one, which will be disappointing maybe for Chelmsford, considering they've just been knocked out of the cup, the FA Cup, in the last weekend just gone by. And then to lose to a relegation-threatened Eastbourne would be a very disappointing week. Farnborough versus Salisbury in another local derby of sorts, relatively speaking. They are both also in the relegation battle for survival in the National League South. Farnborough in 19th, Salisbury in 17th. So they're both currently outside the relegation zone. So we don't need to necessarily worry about it too much, but neither of these two teams, I think, will necessarily want to lose. But I think home advantage maybe wins out. 3-1 to Farnborough at home. Hampton Richmond Borough versus Maidenhead United. Maidenhead have won 3 in a row, and I still suspect they're going to be finishing in the playoffs come the end of the season. I just can't get over how good Maidenhead are normally. They're normally in the National League. See them in National League South, it's a bit of a disappointment, maybe. They're travelling to Hampton Richmond Borough, who did win their last game, but before that one, quite a bad run of form and are just a point of a relegation zone now. And I still wouldn't necessarily rule them out getting relegated, to be honest, because I think Enfield Town at this moment in time on a better run of form. It's hard to tell. But yeah, 3-2 to Maidenhead United. On to the Sunday games. Got Crystal Palace versus Manchester City. Was this the FA Cup final last season? I know Crystal Palace won it last season. Who did they beat? Who did the FA Cup final take place between? Yeah, it was up against Manchester City. And I think Crystal Palace could get Champions League this season. If you've watched this channel for a while, you know that I have been backing them. I'm currently in 4th. I know Man City, are aiming for the title, only 2 points behind it. But I'm going to go with a rare, scrappy win for Crystal Palace at Selhurst Park, a 1-0 win. Forest versus Spurs. Yeah, well, I think Forest might win this. They've had an upturn in performances since Sean Dyche has come in, and Spurs are a bit mid-table-y at the moment. Although I do still suspect that they could maybe narrowly get like Europa League or maybe Conference League if they're lucky. But yeah, 1-0 to Forest. I don't want to say it. I do want them to be absolutely battered, but it's always hard to predict Spurs results. The Tyne-Wear Derby, well, I'm going to have to say it out of self-preservation because I don't want to get killed because I do live in Newcastle, so I've got to go with a Newcastle win, surely. A 3-0 win for Newcastle United, and we have seen better performances of late. 4 games unbeaten in a row. The form does go out the window, really, when you go into it. 1 point separating these two teams. This is probably the first time that these two teams come in at relatively even footing. But yeah, you've got to back Newcastle. Well, thankfully, the game is taking place in Sunderland because I was thinking of going home that weekend and I was a bit worried about it. So that should be all right. Just don't go on the metros. West Ham United versus Aston Villa. Villa in 3rd place and actually 3 points off the title. You can't rule them out necessarily. They've had 5 wins in a row. Can't rule them out at all for getting a title. Now against a West Ham side in the relegation zone, it's got to be a Villa win. 2-1 to Aston Villa. would be great to see Villa to actually lift for Premier League title. I'm sure if you're not a Birmingham City fan or a Coventry fan or anybody living in the West Midlands, but make a bit of difference. And Aston Villa have had huge successes in the past, but not in the Premier League history. Brentford versus Leeds United. Derby have just drawn Leeds United in the FA Cup, actually. We may be mentioning that when Derby applied, when we mentioned the Derby game. But yeah, Brentford, I think they win this one. I'm wanting Leeds and Forest to be relegated, which is maybe a bit greedy of me, but I do want that to happen. So 5-2 to Brentford. We'll go with that. The mid-table team, Brentford. Manchester United versus AFC Bournemouth. Bournemouth on a really bad run of form. And Man United are actually on a decent run of form. Probably not as good as maybe Man United's of old, but still a decent enough run. But yeah, I think Bournemouth, Areola is a decent enough manager that he comes out with a result in this one. 3-0 to Bournemouth. And the last one, Sheffield Wednesday versus Derby County. Wednesday, you'll be happy that I'm going to actually predict Sheffield Wednesday to win. We haven't beaten Sheffield Wednesday since that time that we stayed up on the last day in 2020 against them. So yeah, 4-2 to Sheffield Wednesday. I'm a Derby fan. I wish it didn't happen. And I don't know why I want a Monday night either. And Martin Ryan is saying, come on, you Rams. I'm travelling on Monday, but Sheffield Wednesday are our next rivals after a red shite. Take care, youth. Absolutely. I mean, I don't necessarily view Sheffield Wednesday as our next rivals. I think it goes, for me, Forest, Leeds, Leicester. I don't think even Sheffield Wednesday really get their head into it. I think Sheffield Wednesday more focused about Sheffield United, and we've got a bit of history with Leeds. I don't necessarily think we that bothered about Sheffield Wednesday. But clearly, you yourself, Martin Ryan, has got some adversity going on with that one. So I hope we get the right outcome in that one, especially for you who are travelling to Hillsborough. And I'll just love to see it. Maybe might be going back home from that time for the Christmas season, so I can maybe listen to it on BBC Radio Derby. But I'll see you all in the next one. I'm potentially thinking of doing a 3 up, 3 down. I don't know when that will necessarily be. Maybe Friday. We'll see. But goodbye for now.